The great arena of Zephyria Prime stretched across 20 square kilometers of polished obsidian, its crystalline walls reaching toward twin suns that cast dancing shadows across the combat floor. For 3,000 years, this sacred ground had hosted the Galactic Championship of Strength, where the mightiest warriors from across known space gathered to prove their worth. The arena had seen blood from 1,000 species, witnessed feats that defied physics, and crowned champions whose names echoed through the ages. Today, something unprecedented was about to happen. Thrax the Destroyer stood at the center of the arena, his massive frame casting a shadow that seemed to swallow light itself. Standing 4 meters tall and weighing nearly 2 tons, the Vorthak warrior was a living mountain of muscle and bone. His exoskeleton gleamed like polished steel, scarred from countless battles across the galaxy's most dangerous worlds. 6 arms moved with mechanical precision as he tested his weapons, each limb capable of crushing titanium with casual ease. The crowd of 50,000 spectators, representing 200 different species, roared their approval. Thrax had never been defeated. In his 12-year championship reign, he had broken the spine of a crystalline behemoth, torn the limbs from a methane giant, and reduced a squad of robotic gladiators to scrap metal using only his bare hands. The betting pools across the galaxy had long since stopped taking wagers against him. Victory was not a question when Thrax entered the arena. The only question was how quickly his opponent would fall. High above the arena floor, in the luxury viewing boxes reserved for planetary governors and species representatives, the mood was festive. Ambassador Kelthera of the Aquatic Confederacy rippled her translucent fins in amusement as she watched the pre-fight ceremonies through the arena's energy shields. Her species had ruled the ocean worlds for millennia, their water-adapted bodies hiding incredible strength beneath their flowing, graceful appearance. Another season, another inevitable victory for the Vorthak, she commented to her companion, her voice carrying the musical quality of her aquatic heritage. Sometimes I wonder why other species even bother to compete. Beside her, General ZYX of the Hive Collective clicked his mandibles in agreement. His insectoid form was smaller than many of the arena's champions, but the compound eyes that covered his head had witnessed more battles than most beings could imagine. The general species had conquered 40 star systems through pure tactical brilliance and overwhelming numbers. The competition serves its purpose, ZYX replied, his voice a mechanical buzz produced by specialized vocal chambers. It maintains the pecking order, reminds the lesser species of their place in the galactic hierarchy. Thrax's dominance reinforces Vorthak's supremacy in matters of military alliance and trade negotiations. The arena floor began to shift and change, massive sections of obsidian sliding away to reveal the obstacle course that would serve as today's battlefield. Towers of hardened steel rose from hidden chambers, each one designed to test different aspects of physical and mental strength. Gravity wells activated at random intervals, creating zones where competitors would face forces 10 times normal planetary standard. Energy barriers flickered to life, requiring precise timing and overwhelming power to breach. This was not merely a test of brute force. The Galactic Championship demanded speed, intelligence, adaptability, and, above all, the kind of raw determination that separated true champions from pretenders. The course was different every season, designed by the galaxy's most brilliant engineers to challenge even the most experienced warriors. Thrax moved through his warm-up routine with the confidence of absolute certainty. His 6 arms worked independently, each one performing different exercises that would have crippled lesser beings. He lifted weights that would crush a small vehicle, moved with speed that blurred his massive form, and demonstrated reflexes that seemed impossible for something his size. The crowd's cheers grew louder with each display of power. In the competitor preparation chambers beneath the arena, other challengers waited their turn. Kelmar the Swift, champion of the Desert Runners, paced nervously despite his species' legendary confidence. His lean, elongated form was built for speed and endurance, adapted for life on worlds where survival meant constant motion. But speed meant nothing against an opponent who could shatter mountains. Nearby, Captain Vex of the Silicon Warriors performed final equipment checks on her cybernetic enhancements. Her species had long ago abandoned purely biological forms, transforming themselves into living machines capable of interfacing directly with technology. Every calculation she ran showed the same result. Thrax possessed advantages that made victory mathematically impossible for any current competitor. The atmosphere in the preparation chambers was tense, but resigned. These were the galaxy's elite warriors, beings who had never known defeat on their homeworlds. Yet they all understood the reality of facing Thrax. Participation in the championship was an honor that brought prestige to their species, but actual victory was beyond their reach. Or so they had believed until today. The arena's announcement system crackled to life, its voice carrying across the massive structure in dozens of different languages and communication methods. Honored spectators and noble competitors, we are pleased to announce a special exhibition match today. For the first time in championship history, we welcome a competitor from a recently contacted world designated as Terra, commonly known as Earth. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Earth was barely known to the galactic community, having only been contacted 6 months ago when their primitive radio signals had finally reached civilized space. Initial surveys had classified it as a Class 7 death world, a planet so hostile to life that most species considered it uninhabitable. The fact that any intelligent life had evolved there at all was considered a minor miracle of adaptation. Ambassador Kelthera's fins stopped their gentle motion as she processed this information. A death worlder competing in the championship? Surely this is some kind of mistake. General Zwiax's compound eyes focused with sudden intensity. His species had encountered death worlds before, and the experience had never been pleasant. Planets where the environment itself was actively trying to kill anything that lived there tended to produce life forms with disturbing survival instincts. No mistake, came a new voice from behind them. They turned to see Ambassador Gorlin of the Galactic Council, his ancient form moving with the careful dignity of extreme age. Gorlin's species were among the galaxy's eldest, having achieved spaceflight when most civilizations were still struggling with fire. His word carried weight in all matters of galactic law and custom. The Terrans requested permission to send a representative. Gorlin continued, settling into his seat with a slight wheeze. According to galactic law, any species capable of faster-than-light communication has the right to participate in public competitions. We could not refuse without risking diplomatic incident. Ambassador Kelthera's confusion deepened. But surely they understand the nature of this competition, the physical demands? We're not talking about some intellectual challenge where their inexperience could be overcome with natural cleverness. This is direct physical competition against the galaxy's most powerful warriors. Gorlin's ancient eyes held a glimmer of something that might have been amusement. I expressed similar concerns when I reviewed their application. The Terran representative assured me that their champion was adequately prepared for the challenge. The arena's preparation bay doors began to cycle open, each one revealing a different competitor. Kelmar the Swift emerged first, his form barely visible as he moved at speeds that challenged the arena's tracking systems. Captain Vex followed, her cybernetic enhancements glowing with stored energy. One by one, the galaxy's elite warriors took their positions around the arena's perimeter. Thrax stood at the center, completely motionless except for the slight movement of his breathing. His 6 arms hung loosely at his sides, but every being in the arena could sense the coiled power waiting to be unleashed. He had not even bothered to look at his competition. In 12 years, no opponent had required his full attention for more than a few minutes. The final preparation bay remained closed longer than the others. When it finally began to open, the arena fell strangely quiet. 50,000 beings representing the galaxy's most advanced civilizations watched with curious anticipation to see what kind of creature a death world would produce. What emerged was so unexpected that many spectators initially thought there had been some kind of error. The human was small by galactic standards, standing barely 2 meters in height, and weighing perhaps 80 kilograms. Where other competitors displayed obvious physical advantages, like Thrax's massive frame or Kelmar's elongated limbs, the human appeared almost comically ordinary. Its skin was pale, unmarked by the battle scars that decorated every other competitor. Its limbs showed muscle definition, but nothing that suggested extraordinary strength. Most puzzling of all, the human was completely calm. Every other competitor showed signs of the stress and adrenaline that naturally preceded mortal combat. Racing hearts, heightened breathing, aggressive posturing, nervous energy discharge, or chemical preparation for battle. The human displayed none of these indicators. It walked onto the arena floor with the same casual confidence someone might show while taking an evening stroll. "What is that thing?" Ambassador Kelthra whispered, her fins rippling with uncertainty. The human wore simple clothing that seemed more suited to light exercise than gladiatorial combat. No armor, no visible weapons, no technological enhancements. It carried a small device that appeared to be some kind of communication equipment and wore soft-soled shoes that would provide minimal protection against the arena's harsh surfaces. Thrax finally looked up as the human approached the starting position. For the first time in years, the Vorthak champion seemed genuinely puzzled. His 6 arms shifted slightly, a subtle sign of confusion that sent ripples through the observing crowd. Thrax had faced every type of warrior the galaxy could produce. He understood power in all its forms. But this creature made no sense according to any framework he knew. The human stopped at its assigned position and looked around the arena with what appeared to be mild interest. Its eyes passed over the towering obstacles, the gravity wells, the energy barriers, and the assembled competitors with the same casual attention someone might give to street decorations. When its gaze reached Thrax, it nodded politely and smiled. It smiled. In the preparation chambers, several competitors exchanged glances of disbelief. Smiling before mortal combat was either a sign of complete insanity or confidence, so absolute it bordered on the incomprehensible. Either option was deeply disturbing. The arena's voice system activated again, beginning the traditional pre-competition ceremonies. "Noble warriors, you stand upon sacred ground where legends are born and heroes are crowned. Today you will face challenges that will test every aspect of your being. Strength, speed, intelligence, courage, and shall all be measured. Only one among you can claim victory and the honor that comes with it." The human reached up and touched the communication device it wore. A voice emerged, speaking in the melodic tones of the human language before being translated by the arena systems. "Sarah Chan to Houston Control. I'm in position and ready to begin the demonstration. All systems are nominal. Beginning recording for mission analysis." The casual, almost business-like tone sent a chill through many observers. This was not the voice of someone preparing for desperate battle. It was the voice of someone beginning a routine task. High in the viewing boxes, General Zawayax's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. "That communication pattern," he muttered to Ambassador Kelthra. "It's following military protocols. Professional military protocols." Ambassador Kelthra's fins had gone completely still, a sign of deep unease. What kind of world produces military personnel who speak of mortal combat as a routine demonstration? Ambassador Gorlin leaned forward in his seat, his ancient features creased with sudden concern. He had lived long enough to recognize dangerous patterns, and something about the human's behavior was triggering every instinctual warning his species had developed over millennia of survival. The arena's countdown began, its voice echoing across the obsidian field. "Competitors, prepare yourselves. The Galactic Championship of Strength begins in 10 seconds. Thrax dropped into his combat stance, 6 arms spreading wide to provide maximum flexibility. His exoskeleton plates shifted, revealing joints optimized for explosive movement. Every muscle in his massive frame tense for action. Around the arena's perimeter, other competitors made final preparations. Kelmar's form became a blur of motion as his species' legendary speed engaged. Captain Vex's cybernetic systems activated, flooding her enhanced body with performance chemicals and computational assistance. The human stood perfectly still and continued smiling. 5 seconds. The gravity wells hummed to life, their effects rippling across the arena floor like invisible waves of crushing force. Energy barriers sparked between the steel towers, creating maze-like pathways that shifted and changed with each passing moment. 3 seconds. 50,000 spectators held their collective breath. Betting pools across the galaxy processed final wagers. Military observers from dozens of species prepared to analyze the combat techniques that would be displayed. 2 seconds. Thrax's breathing stopped, his massive body coiling like a spring ready to unleash 12 years of accumulated power and experience. 1 second. The human closed its eyes for a brief moment, as if listening to something only it could hear. "Begin." The arena erupted into chaos as the galaxy's mightiest warriors launched themselves toward the first obstacles. Thrax moved with speed that defied his massive size, his 6 arms propelling him forward like a living siege engine. Kelmar became a streak of motion, his form barely visible as he navigated between gravity wells with impossible precision. Captain Vex activated her jump jets, rising above the initial obstacles while her targeting systems locked onto optimal pathways through the maze of energy barriers. Other competitors followed their own strategies, each one representing the peak of their species' evolutionary development. The human began walking, not running, not leaping, not employing any visible superhuman abilities, walking at a pace that would have been considered leisurely on any civilized world. For the first few seconds, the crowd assumed this was some kind of tactical mistake or technological failure. Perhaps the Deathworlder was unfamiliar with the arena's starting signals. Perhaps its species processed time differently, and it had not yet realized the competition had begun. But as the seconds passed, and the human continued its unhurried pace, a different possibility began to emerge. The human was not confused or malfunctioning. It was choosing to walk. Thrax reached the first major obstacle, a steel wall 15 meters high and 3 meters thick. Without slowing, he drove all 6 arms forward in a coordinated strike that punched through the metal like paper. The impact created a thunderous crash that echoed throughout the arena, followed by the groaning of stressed metal as the entire wall structure shuddered. Kelmar reached the same wall seconds later and simply ran up its surface, his species' ability to manipulate gravitational fields allowing him to treat the vertical surface as level ground. He passed through Thrax's hole without slowing, already moving toward the next challenge. Captain Vex approached from above, her scanning systems having identified a weakness in the wall's upper section. She fired a concentrated plasma burst that melted through the metal, creating her own passage while simultaneously analyzing the defensive capabilities of her competitors. Other warriors employed their own methods: brute force, advanced technology, exotic abilities, tactical intelligence. Each approach reflected millions of years of evolutionary development and thousands of years of military refinement. The human reached the wall and stopped. It stood before the 15-meter barrier, looking up at its height with the same mild interest it had shown earlier. There was no sign of frustration or concern at this apparently insurmountable obstacle. No indication that it was preparing to employ whatever superhuman abilities had earned it a place in this competition. Instead, it reached out and touched the wall's surface with one hand. The gesture was so simple, so ordinary, that many spectators initially missed its significance. The human was not striking the wall, not attempting to climb it, not employing any visible technique or technology. It was simply touching it. The wall exploded, not cracked, not damaged, not breached in a single location. The entire 15-meter-high, 3-meter-thick steel barrier simply disintegrated, transforming from solid metal to fragments of debris in less than a second. The explosion was perfectly controlled, directed away from the human and other competitors, leaving a clear pathway where moments before had stood an obstacle designed to challenge the galaxy's mightiest warriors. The arena fell silent except for the sound of settling debris. In the viewing boxes, Ambassador Kelthra's fins had gone completely rigid. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. What just happened? General Zoex's compound eyes were all focused on the human figure now calmly stepping through the gap where the wall had been. His mandibles had stopped clicking entirely, a sign of shock so profound that his species' normal nervous responses had shut down. Ambassador Gorland's ancient features had gone pale. In his thousands of years of life, he had seen weapons that could destroy cities, powers that could shatter planets, technologies that could remake the fundamental structure of matter itself. But he had never seen anything that looked so much like casual indifference to the laws of physics. On the arena floor, the competition continued, but now every competitor was stealing glances at the human. Thrax had stopped moving entirely, all 6 arms frozen in mid-motion as he tried to process what he had witnessed. The impact that had destroyed the wall should have killed any being standing that close to it. The human should have been vaporized by the explosive forces it had somehow unleashed. Instead, it continued walking toward the next obstacle, as if nothing unusual had happened. The second challenge was a gravity well strong enough to crush most species into the ground. The arena's engineers had calibrated it to produce forces equivalent to 50 times normal planetary gravity, making movement all but impossible for even the strongest competitors. Standard strategy involved either moving fast enough to minimize exposure time or employing technology to counteract the gravitational effects. Thrax approached the gravity well's edge and braced himself, his 6 arms finding purchase on the arena floor as he prepared to force his way through the crushing field. His exoskeleton groaned under the increased pressure, but his massive frame was strong enough to continue moving, albeit at greatly reduced speed. Kelmar activated his species' gravitational manipulation abilities, creating a localized field that partially countered the arena's gravity well. Even with this advantage, his progress was slow and obviously draining his energy reserves. The human walked into the gravity well without any visible preparation or protection, and continued walking at the same leisurely pace. 50 times normal gravity should have flattened the human against the arena floor. At minimum, it should have forced the creature to crawl or struggle for every step. Instead, the human moved through the gravitational field as if it simply did not exist. More disturbing still, the gravity well began to fluctuate. The crushing forces that were slowing even Thrax started to weaken and shift, as if the human's presence was somehow interfering with the arena's carefully calibrated systems. By the time the human reached the center of the gravity well, the field had completely collapsed. Ambassador Kelthera's voice was tight, with barely controlled fear when she spoke again. That's impossible. Gravitational fields don't just stop working because someone walks through them. Unless, General Zyax replied slowly, his mechanical voice carrying an undertone of dread, that someone is generating their own gravitational field. A field strong enough to overwhelm the arena systems. Ambassador Gorland's hands were gripping his seat so tightly that the metal was beginning to deform. The energy requirements for personal gravity manipulation on that scale would be beyond anything in our technological database. The power source alone would require a small star. On the arena floor, Thrax had begun moving again, but his confidence was visibly shaken. For the first time in 12 years, the undefeated champion was showing signs of uncertainty. His 6 arms moved with less precision, and his head kept turning to track the human's progress through obstacles that should have been impossible to bypass. The third challenge was an energy maze, a series of plasma barriers that would burn through most armor and required precise timing to navigate safely. The barriers followed complex patterns, creating windows of opportunity that lasted mere fractions of a second. Captain Vex approached the maze with her cybernetic systems running at maximum capacity. Her enhanced reflexes and computational abilities allowed her to calculate safe paths through the deadly energy fields, but even with technological assistance, she had to move carefully to avoid incineration. Other competitors employed various strategies. Some used personal shields to absorb the energy temporarily. Others relied on pure speed to minimize exposure. A few possessed natural resistances that allowed them to endure brief contact with the plasma fields. The human walked directly through an active barrier. The plasma field, designed to burn through hardened military armor, simply parted around the human's form like water flowing around stone. Where the energy touched the human's skin or clothing, nothing happened. No burns, no damage, no indication that the creature was even aware of the deadly forces surrounding it. More barriers appeared in the human's path. Each one parted in the same impossible manner, creating a clear corridor through what should have been an impassable obstacle. The human never slowed, never deviated from its straight-line path, never showed any sign that it was employing effort or concentration to achieve these effects. In the viewing boxes, panic was beginning to set in among the spectators and officials. What they were witnessing went beyond impressive physical abilities or advanced technology. This was a fundamental violation of everything they understood about the nature of reality itself. "We need to stop this," Ambassador Kelthera whispered, her fins rippling with terror. "Whatever that thing is, it's not a normal competitor. It's not even following the basic laws of physics." General ZYX was rapidly clicking his mandibles in a pattern that indicated extreme agitation. "My analysis systems can't even categorize what I'm observing. Every sensor reading is showing impossible results. That creature is somehow interfering with forces at the quantum level. Ambassador Gorlin was already reaching for his communication device. I'm calling for an emergency halt to the competition. This has gone beyond. He stopped mid-sentence as the human reached the arena's center, where Thrax waited. For the first time since entering the arena, the human stopped walking. It stood perhaps 10 meters from the galaxy's most feared warrior, looking up at the massive Vorthack with the same mild interest it had shown everything else. Thrax had not moved from his position. All 6 arms hung motionless at his sides. His breathing was rapid and shallow, patterns that indicated fear in his species. The undefeated champion of 12 years was afraid. The human tilted its head slightly, as if considering something, then spoke in its melodic language. The arena's translation system carried its words to every spectator. Hello there. I'm Sarah Chun, representing Earth in this competition. I understand you're the current champion. It's nice to meet you. The casual politeness of the greeting was somehow more terrifying than any battle cry could have been. Thrax's response was barely audible, his voice carrying the tone of someone who had seen something beyond their ability to comprehend. What are you? The human smiled again, the same gentle expression that had confused observers at the competition's beginning. I'm just a human. We're pretty new to your galactic community, so I thought it might be good to demonstrate what we're capable of. You know, make a good first impression. The implications of that statement rippled through the arena like a physical force. This creature, this impossibly powerful being that had just demonstrated abilities beyond anything in known science, was calling its performance a demonstration. It was trying to make a good impression, which raised the terrifying question. If this was humanity making a good impression, what would they look like if they were actually trying to be intimidating? Thrax had faced death before. During his rise to championship, he had stared into the maw of creatures that could swallow starships whole, fought beings whose very presence warped reality around them, and emerged victorious against odds that had seemed impossible. Fear was not foreign to him, but this was different. This was the kind of primal terror that existed at the cellular level, the recognition of something so far beyond his understanding that his mind struggled to process its existence. The human standing before him defied every law of physics he knew. It had walked through obstacles designed to challenge gods, treated forces that could crush planets as minor inconveniences, and done it all with the casual indifference of someone taking a leisurely stroll. Now it stood there smiling at him, politely introducing itself as if they had met at a social gathering rather than in the galaxy's most dangerous arena. A demonstration, Thrax repeated slowly, his voice carrying harmonics of confusion and growing dread. You call this a demonstration? Sarah Chun nodded pleasantly, her posture relaxed and unthreatening despite the impossible power she had just displayed. Well, yes. First contact situations require careful handling. We wanted to show the galactic community that humans could be valuable allies while also making it clear that we're not defenseless. Earth's diplomats thought a friendly competition would be the perfect opportunity. The words hit Thrax like physical blows. Friendly competition. This creature had just casually violated the fundamental laws of reality and was describing it as a friendly competition. The implications were staggering. If this was humanity's idea of friendly, what would they consider hostile? Around the arena, the other competitors had stopped their attempts to navigate the remaining obstacles. Every warrior present was now focused on the conversation taking place at the arena center. The casual tone of the human's voice was somehow more unnerving than any roar of challenge could have been. Captain Vex's cybernetic systems were running continuous scans, trying to analyze the human's capabilities. Every sensor reading came back with results that made no sense. No energy signatures that would indicate advanced technology. No biological markers that suggested superhuman physiology. No exotic matter emissions that would explain the gravitational and electromagnetic anomalies. According to her instruments, Sarah Chun was exactly what she appeared to be, an ordinary member of her species. That impossibility was more frightening than any weapon. In the viewing boxes, the panic was spreading beyond the immediate observers. Emergency communications were flooding the arena's control systems as representatives from dozens of species demanded answers. Military advisors were calculating threat assessments and coming back with numbers that crashed their analytical systems. Diplomatic corps were frantically trying to establish contact with their governments to report what they were witnessing. Ambassador Kelthera's aquatic form was trembling, her translucent fins rippling with patterns that indicated extreme distress. Gorlin, we need to establish formal diplomatic contact with this species immediately. If they have more individuals like this one, they could represent a fundamental shift in galactic power structures. General Zawix's compound eyes were all focused on the arena floor, tracking every micro-movement of the human's form. His tactical mind was running scenario after scenario, trying to find some way to counter or contain the abilities being displayed. Every analysis came back with the same conclusion: impossible to defeat through conventional means. Look at the energy readings from the arena floor, he said, his mechanical voice tight with controlled fear. Wherever the human has walked, the quantum field fluctuations are still present. It's not just manipulating forces in real time. It's leaving permanent changes in the structure of reality itself. Ambassador Gorlin's ancient features were creased with deep concern. He had lived through wars that reshaped entire sectors of space, seen the rise and fall of civilizations that had seemed eternal. His perspective was measured in geological time, and he understood the long-term implications of what they were witnessing better than anyone. This changes everything, he said quietly. If humanity possesses individuals with these capabilities, and if this truly is just a friendly demonstration, then we are looking at a species that could reshape the galactic order without even trying. The question is not whether we can contain them. The question is whether they will choose to be benevolent. On the arena floor, Sarah Chun seemed completely unaware of the chaos her presence was causing among the spectators. She was focused entirely on Thrax, studying the massive warrior with the same scientific curiosity she had shown toward the arena's obstacles. "I hope you don't mind me saying," she continued in her pleasant tone, "but you're quite impressive. Our xenobiological teams are going to be fascinated by the physiological adaptations your species has developed. Six-limb coordination at that level of strength requires incredibly sophisticated neural architecture." Thrax's breathing became more labored. Being analyzed like a laboratory specimen by something that had just demonstrated godlike power was adding insult to an injury he was only beginning to comprehend. His pride as a warrior warred with the growing recognition that he was facing something completely outside his experience. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice barely controlled. Sarah tilted her head slightly, apparently surprised by the question. "Want from you? Nothing really. This is just a competition, right? I thought the goal was to complete the obstacle course and demonstrate our capabilities. I'm not here to hurt anyone." The casual dismissal of violence as an option was somehow more threatening than any declaration of hostile intent could have been. Thrax was a warrior who understood conflict in all its forms. He could respect an enemy who sought his destruction, could find honor in facing overwhelming odds, could accept defeat at the hands of a superior opponent. What he could not process was being treated as irrelevant. "You have made it clear that I cannot defeat you," Thrax said slowly. "Your power is beyond anything I have encountered. But I'm still the champion of this arena. I will not yield without testing your strength against mine." Sarah's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. "I appreciate your position, but I really don't think that's a good idea. Humans are quite a bit more durable than most species. I wouldn't want to accidentally hurt you during a sparring match." The offer of mercy was the final straw for Thrax's warrior pride. With a roar that shook the arena's crystalline walls, he launched himself forward with every ounce of power his massive frame could generate. 6 arms moved in perfect coordination, each one delivering a strike that could shatter mountains. His speed was beyond anything most beings could track, his strength legendary across the galaxy. Sarah sidestepped the attack, not with superhuman speed or dramatic acrobatics. She simply took one step to the left, moving at the same leisurely pace she had maintained throughout the entire demonstration. Thrax's devastating assault passed harmlessly through empty air. The momentum of his attack carried him past Sarah, and he spun rapidly to face her again. His 6 arms repositioned for another strike, this time accounting for her movement speed and positioning. He had analyzed her dodge and was already adapting his tactics. Sarah remained perfectly still, hands clasped behind her back, watching his preparations with polite interest. Thrax struck again, this time targeting the space where she stood with a pattern of attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. 6 different strike vectors, timed to arrive simultaneously, covering every possible escape route. Sarah ducked under the entire barrage by bending slightly at the waist. The casual nature of her avoidance was more demoralizing than any counterattack could have been. She was not fighting him. She was not even trying to fight him. She was simply existing in spaces where his attacks were not. Growing desperate, Thrax abandoned tactical thinking and threw himself into a berserker assault. His 6 arms became a blur of motion, striking at speeds that should have been impossible for something his size. The arena floor cracked under the force of his missed blows. The air itself seemed to scream from the passage of his limbs. Sarah walked around him in a slow circle, staying just outside his reach without any apparent effort. The display continued for nearly a minute before Thrax's strength began to falter. His breathing became ragged, his movements less precise. 12 years of championship conditioning could not sustain the level of exertion he was pouring into his attacks. But more than physical exhaustion, it was the psychological impact of complete futility that was breaking him down. Finally, his arms dropped to his sides, and he stood motionless, his massive chest heaving with exhaustion and defeat. "This is not possible," he whispered, his voice carrying the hollow tone of shattered certainty. "No being moves like that. No creature can simply exist where attacks are not without superhuman speed or precognitive abilities. What you're doing violates the basic principles of combat." Sarah stopped her slow circle and faced him directly. For the first time since the demonstration began, her expression became serious. "You're right," she said quietly. "What I'm doing does violate the basic principles of combat as you understand them. But you're thinking about this wrong. I'm not faster than you. I'm not stronger than you. I don't have precognitive abilities or advanced technology helping me predict your movements." She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a weight that made every being in the arena listen more carefully. "I'm not fighting you at all. Fighting requires that both participants operate according to the same basic rules. We don't." Thrax's compound eyes focused on her with desperate intensity. "Explain." Sarah looked around the arena, taking in the twisted wreckage of obstacles she had casually destroyed, the other competitors who had stopped to watch their interaction, the thousands of spectators whose certainties about the nature of reality were crumbling in real time. "Your species, like most in the galaxy, evolved on worlds that were basically stable. Predictable gravity, consistent atmospheric conditions, manageable environmental challenges. You developed strength and intelligence and technology to overcome obstacles, but those obstacles followed rules you could understand and master." She gestured toward the arena floor, where the quantum field fluctuations were still visible as ripples in the air itself. "Earth is what your surveys classified as a death world. But that classification doesn't really capture what it means to evolve there. Our planet doesn't just try to kill us. It tries to kill us in ways that change constantly, unpredictably, without regard for any rules we might think we understand." Thrax's breathing had stabilized, but his posture remained tense. He was listening to something that would fundamentally alter his understanding of the universe. Ice ages that last for millions of years, followed by periods where the entire surface becomes molten rock. Magnetic poles that flip randomly, exposing everything to deadly radiation. Supervolcanoes that can change the planetary climate overnight. Asteroid impacts that reset the entire evolutionary process. And those are just the large-scale disasters. Sarah's voice took on a different quality, carrying harmonics that suggested she was speaking from deeply personal experience. On a day-to-day basis, Earth tries to kill us with weather patterns that can spawn tornadoes powerful enough to level cities, earthquakes that split continents, tsunamis that reshape coastlines, diseases that evolve faster than we can develop treatments, predators that have been optimized by millions of years of evolution to hunt creatures exactly like us. Around the arena, absolute silence had fallen. Even the whispered conversations in the viewing boxes had stopped as the implications of her words began to sink in. "So we adapted," Sarah continued, her tone becoming almost conversational again. "But not in the way you might expect. We didn't become stronger or faster or smarter than the forces trying to kill us. We became something else entirely." She held up one hand, examining her fingers as if seeing them for the first time. "We learned to exist in states that don't make sense according to normal physics. When a tornado comes, we don't run from it or try to be stronger than it. We simply are not where the tornado is. When an earthquake hits, we don't build structures to withstand it. We exist in harmony with the shaking earth until it stops." Thrax's voice was barely audible when he spoke. "That's impossible. Matter cannot exist in multiple states simultaneously. Objects cannot choose not to be affected by forces acting upon them. Sarah's gentle smile returned. You're right. It is impossible. But Earth doesn't care what's impossible. It just keeps trying to kill us in impossible ways. So we learn to survive in impossible ways. She gestured toward the ruined obstacles scattered around the arena. That wall didn't explode because I hit it with force. It exploded because I convinced it that being destroyed was the natural state for matter in that location. The gravity, didn't stop working because I overpowered it. It stopped working because I existed in a state where gravity was not relevant to my movement. The energy barriers didn't burn me because I was not present in the quantum state where those photons existed. The silence that followed her explanation was deafening. Every being in the arena was trying to process concepts that challenged everything they thought they knew about the nature of reality itself. Captain Vex cybernetic systems had been recording everything, but her analysis programs were returning error codes. The human's explanation did not fit into any known framework of physics, biology, or technology. Yet the evidence of what she had accomplished was undeniable. In the viewing boxes, Ambassador Kelthra was the first to find her voice. If what you're saying is true, she said, her words carrying across the arena through the communication systems, then humans are not just another species joining the galactic community. You're something entirely outside our understanding of what life can be. Sarah looked up toward the viewing boxes and waved politely. Oh, hello there. I didn't realize the audience could communicate directly. And yes, you're probably right about us being outside normal understanding. That tends to happen when you evolve on a world that regularly ignores the laws of physics. General ZYX's mechanical voice crackled over the communication system. The military implications of your abilities are staggering. If humanity can field individuals with your capabilities, you could theoretically neutralize any threat in the galaxy without engaging in traditional warfare. Sarah's expression became more serious again. That's why I'm here, actually. Earth's leaders wanted to make sure everyone understood that we're not interested in conquest or domination. We're quite happy on our death world, and we have no desire to make other species' lives more difficult than they already are. She gestured toward Thrax, who was still standing motionless, processing everything he had witnessed. But we also want to make it clear that we're not defenseless. There are some very unpleasant beings in the galaxy, according to our initial intelligence reports. Slavers, genocidal empires, species that view other forms of life as expendable resources. We thought it might be good to establish that humans are not suitable targets for that kind of treatment. Ambassador Gorland's ancient voice carried across the arena with the weight of centuries of diplomatic experience. Young human, what you are describing sounds very much like a warning disguised as a friendly demonstration. Sarah's smile became brighter, but there was something in her eyes that had not been there before. A quality that reminded observers of the deep, patient darkness between stars. It's not a warning, Ambassador. It's just information. Humans are generally peaceful, friendly beings who prefer cooperation to conflict. We like learning about other cultures, sharing knowledge, and finding ways to help each other solve problems. She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried harmonics that made the arena's crystalline walls resonate with subtle vibrations. But Earth taught us that sometimes peaceful, friendly beings still need to protect themselves and others from forces that don't care about peace or friendship. So we learned how to do that too. The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. Here was a being that could casually violate the laws of physics, representing a species that had evolved on a world that regularly did the same thing. And they were offering friendship to the galaxy while simultaneously making it clear that hostility would be inadvisable. Thrax finally moved, stepping backward to put more distance between himself and Sarah. His defeat was absolute, but more than that, his entire understanding of strength and power had been fundamentally altered. He had thought he understood what it meant to be strong. Now he realized he had been living in a universe where true strength was something he could not even comprehend. I yield, he said formally, his voice carrying across the arena. I yield the championship, and acknowledge that I have been defeated by a superior opponent. Sarah looked genuinely surprised. Oh, you don't need to do that. This wasn't really a competition between us. I mean, you're working with normal physics, and I'm working with Earth physics. That's not exactly a fair matchup. The casual dismissal of his surrender was somehow the final indignity. Thrax had been defeated not by a superior warrior, but by something so far beyond his level that the concept of competition was meaningless. Then, what was the point of this demonstration? He asked, his voice heavy with confusion and exhaustion. Sarah's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. The point was to introduce humanity to the galactic community in a way that would minimize future misunderstandings. We wanted to be upfront about our capabilities so that everyone could make informed decisions about how they want to interact with us. She gestured around the arena, taking in the thousands of stunned spectators and the wreckage of obstacles that had been considered insurmountable just minutes before. We're hoping for peaceful relationships with everyone. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific cooperation, that sort of thing. But we also wanted to make sure that anyone considering less friendly approaches would have accurate information to work with. The message was clear without being stated directly. Humanity was offering partnership to those who wanted it, and making it very clear that aggression would be futile for those who did not. In the viewing boxes, frantic conversations were taking place as representatives began to grasp the full scope of what they had witnessed. Military advisors were calculating power scales and coming back with numbers that suggested a single human might be capable of neutralizing entire fleets. Diplomatic corps were already drafting urgent communications to their governments, recommending immediate establishment of formal relations with Earth. But beneath the political and strategic considerations, there was a deeper realization spreading through the arena. The galaxy had just been introduced to a form of life that operated according to rules that no one else understood. And that life form was politely asking to be friends while demonstrating capabilities that could reshape the entire structure of galactic civilization. The age of predictable physics and comprehensible power structures was ending. And it was ending with a smile and a friendly introduction. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 18 hours after Sarah Chen's demonstration in the Zephyrian Arena. Representatives from over 300 species gathered in the massive council chambers on Nexus Prime, their voices creating a cacophony of fear, confusion, and desperate strategizing that echoed through the crystalline halls like the sound of civilization itself being questioned. Admiral Kethvar of the Hegemony War Fleet stood at the central podium, his scarred exoskeleton bearing witness to conflicts that had shaped the galactic order for centuries. His species, the Krillians, had built their reputation on military superiority and the kind of brutal efficiency that made other civilizations think twice before challenging their interests. Now he was addressing a room full of beings whose fundamental assumptions about power had been shattered in the span of an afternoon. Fellow representatives, Admiral Kethvar began, his voice amplified across the chamber through dozens of translation matrices. We are facing an unprecedented situation. The species known as humans has demonstrated capabilities that challenge our understanding of what is possible within the known laws of physics. Around the chamber, beings that had never agreed on anything were nodding in unison. The footage from the arena had been analyzed by every major scientific institution in the galaxy, and all had reached the same impossible conclusion. What they had witnessed could not be explained by any known science. Ambassador Kelthra rose from her aquatic delegation section, her translucent form rippling with barely controlled anxiety. Admiral, we need to address the immediate strategic implications. If the human demonstration is representative of their species' general capabilities, we are looking at a fundamental shift in the galactic power balance. More than a shift, interrupted General Zoyx, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lighting in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. We are looking at the potential obsolescence of conventional military doctrine. Every war game simulation we have run since the arena demonstration has concluded with the same result: complete tactical futility against opponents with those capabilities. The Hegemony's chief scientist, Dr. Vorthak Prime, activated his holographic display systems to show the arena footage in slow motion. Even at reduced speed, Sarah Chen's movements looked like reality was simply rearranging itself around her presence rather than any form of normal locomotion. The quantum analysis is even more disturbing, Dr. Vorthak Prime announced, his mechanical voice carrying harmonics of scientific bewilderment. The human female appears to be manipulating fundamental forces at the subatomic level without any detectable energy expenditure. She is not overpowering natural laws. She is convincing them to behave differently. A ripple of unease passed through the assembled representatives. The idea of beings who could negotiate with physics itself was more frightening than any conventional weapon. Ambassador Gorlin raised his ancient form from his seat with the careful dignity of extreme age. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of millennia of diplomatic experience. Honor colleagues, I believe we may be approaching this situation from the wrong perspective. We are analyzing the human demonstration as if it were a display of military capability. But consider the context. They came to us. They requested permission to participate in a peaceful competition. They introduced themselves politely and explained their intentions clearly. He paused, allowing his words to settle before continuing. The human female could have demonstrated her abilities by disintegrating our military installations or simply appeared in our capital cities without warning. Instead, she asked permission to compete in a sporting event and spent considerable effort reassuring everyone that her species has peaceful intentions. Admiral Kethvar's scarred features twisted into what might have been a grimace. You're suggesting that we should be grateful for their restraint. I'm suggesting that we should recognize restraint when we see it, Gorlin replied. And that level of restraint, combined with those capabilities, tells us something very important about the nature of this species. The chamber fell silent as representatives considered the implications. A species with godlike power that chose to introduce itself through friendly competition was either displaying remarkable wisdom or was so powerful that it could afford to be casual about potential threats. Neither option was particularly comforting. Dr. Ilara of the Science Consortium activated her communication array, her crystalline form pulsing with colors that indicated deep analytical thought. I have been reviewing the preliminary reports from our xenoanthropology teams. The initial surveys of Earth revealed a planet with environmental conditions that should not support complex life, let alone sentient beings. She called up holographic displays showing Earth's geological history, its violent weather patterns, and the constant cycle of mass extinctions that had shaped its evolutionary development. What we are seeing is not the result of advanced technology or exotic evolutionary adaptations. We are seeing the end product of 4 billion years of natural selection operating under conditions that would sterilize most worlds. Every generation of life on that planet faced challenges that would be considered apocalyptic events on our homeworlds. The displays showed the progression of Earth's climate catastrophes, the asteroid impacts, the supervolcanic eruptions, the ice ages that could last for millions of years. Each event should have ended complex life permanently. They survived by becoming something that does not fit our definitions of life as we understand it, Dr. Ilara continued. Traditional evolution produces organisms adapted to specific environmental conditions. Earth's evolution produced organisms adapted to the concept of constant environmental impossibility. General ZYX's mandibles clicked in patterns that indicated frustrated analysis. Are you suggesting that all humans possess the capabilities we observed in the arena? Dr. Ilara's crystalline form shifted to colors indicating uncertainty. Unknown. But if those capabilities are the result of evolutionary adaptation rather than individual talent or technology, then yes. Every human would theoretically possess some degree of ability to manipulate fundamental forces at the quantum level. The implications rippled through the chamber like a physical wave. A single human had demonstrated abilities that could neutralize fleets and reshape planetary surfaces. If an entire species possessed similar capabilities, the concept of interstellar warfare became meaningless. Admiral Kethvar's voice carried undertones of barely controlled panic when he spoke again. How many humans are there? Ambassador Kelthra consulted her diplomatic files, her fins rippling with patterns that indicated deep unease. Initial surveys estimated approximately 8 billion individuals on Earth, with growing populations in off-world colonies. 8 billion beings with godlike capabilities. The silence that followed was deafening. Ambassador Gorlin's ancient voice eventually broke the quiet. Perhaps it is time to establish formal diplomatic contact with Earth and invite them to address the Council directly. We need to understand their intentions and capabilities more clearly. Agreed, Admiral Kethvar said, his warrior's instincts telling him that knowledge was their only hope of survival. But we also need to prepare for the possibility that their intentions are not as peaceful as they claim. How exactly do you propose we prepare for conflict with beings who can convince physics to behave differently? Dr. Alara asked, her crystalline form pulsing with colors indicating scientific impossibility. The question hung in the air, unanswered, because no one in the chamber had any idea how to respond to it. Meanwhile, in a small cafe on the outskirts of New Geneva, Earth, Sarah Chun was enjoying a cup of coffee and reviewing her mission reports while her debrief team analyzed the footage from the arena demonstration. The cafe was unremarkable in every way, filled with the kind of ordinary humans who went about their daily lives without ever considering that they might be living impossibilities. "So how did it go?" asked Marcus Webb, sliding into the seat across from her. As Earth's newly appointed director of Zen Relations, he was responsible for managing humanity's introduction to the galactic community. The fact that he looked like an ordinary middle-aged bureaucrat rather than someone capable of reshaping reality was perhaps the most unsettling thing about the entire situation. Sarah smiled over her coffee cup. "Pretty well, I think. The arena demonstration went exactly as planned. I was able to show our capabilities without being threatening, and I made it clear that we're interested in peaceful relationships. Any complications?" Well, the reigning champion seemed a bit upset about losing his title, but he took it well overall. And some of the spectators looked like they might need time to process what they saw. But that's normal for first contact situations. Marcus nodded, making notes on his tablet with the casual efficiency of someone managing routine administrative tasks rather than the potential restructuring of galactic civilization. "The quantum resonance readings are interesting," he continued, reviewing data from sensors that have been monitoring Earth's dimensional stability during the demonstration. "Your presence in the arena created field fluctuations that are still detectable from here. The alien technology seems more sensitive to reality manipulation than we expected." Sarah shrugged. "Their tech is designed to work with stable physics. When you start bending the rules, sensitive equipment tends to notice." Around them, other cafe patrons continued their conversations about work, relationships, sports, and all the mundane concerns that filled ordinary lives. None of them seemed particularly concerned that their species had just announced its presence to the galaxy by casually violating the fundamental laws of physics. But then they were humans. Impossible things were just part of the background noise of existence. "The Council wants to establish formal diplomatic relations," Marcus continued. "They're requesting that Earth send representatives to address their full assembly." "That's good news. Who are we sending?" "Standard diplomatic team. Ambassador Rodriguez will head the delegation, with Dr. Patel handling scientific exchanges and Colonel Morrison covering military liaison duties." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Standard team? No demonstrations of capabilities?" Marcus smiled. "The plan is to let them assume that you're one of our most capable individuals rather than completely average. Let them adjust to the idea of superhuman abilities before they learn that every human can do what you did." The strategy was typically human. Rather than overwhelm potential allies with the full scope of humanity's capabilities, they would allow the galactic community to gradually adapt to new realities. It was the kind of careful approach that a species learned when evolution taught them that shocking changes usually led to extinction events. "Makes sense," Sarah agreed. "No point in giving everyone panic attacks right away." "Exactly. Though we may need to accelerate the timeline if anyone decides to test our defensive capabilities." Sarah's expression became more serious. "Any signs of that?" Marcus consulted his tablet, scrolling through intelligence reports from monitoring stations scattered across the galaxy. "The hegemony is running extensive war game simulations, but that's expected. A few of the more aggressive species are making noise about maintaining galactic stability, which could be concerning. And there's some interesting energy buildups in the void sector that might be worth monitoring." "The Devourers?" "Possibly. Our long-range sensors are detecting movement in their territory for the first time in centuries. Could be coincidence, but the timing is suspicious." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. The Devourers were one of the galaxy's nightmare species, beings that consumed entire civilizations and had been contained only through the combined efforts of every major power. If they were responding to humanity's emergence, it could indicate either opportunity or threat. "Should I stick around Earth in case we need another demonstration?" Marcus shook his head. "You're scheduled for the Centauri colony inspection next week. We need to make sure our off-world settlements are prepared for increased alien attention. And, honestly, if the situation requires intervention, Sarah-Chin level capabilities won't be necessary." The casual way he dismissed godlike power as insufficient for serious threats was perhaps the most alien thing about the conversation. Humans had evolved on a world where individual survival often required abilities that would be considered supernatural elsewhere. But when the real threats emerged, they required something more than any individual could provide. They required humanity working together. Back on Nexus Prime, the emergency council session was concluding with a series of resolutions that amounted to organized panic dressed in diplomatic language. Formal contact would be established with Earth, defensive protocols would be reviewed and updated, and extensive research would begin into methods for detecting and countering reality manipulation abilities. But beneath the official actions, a deeper change was taking place. For centuries, the galactic order had been based on predictable power structures and comprehensible technologies. Military strength could be measured, economic influence could be calculated, and diplomatic leverage could be assessed. Everything operated according to rules that all participants understood. Now those rules had been revealed as local phenomena rather than universal constants. Somewhere in the galaxy was a species that played by different rules entirely, and those rules seemed to be more fundamental than anything the established civilizations had ever encountered. Admiral Kethvar remained in the chamber after most representatives had departed, studying the arena footage for the 100th time and trying to find some flaw in the humans' demonstration that might suggest limitations or vulnerabilities. His analysis systems continued to return the same result. No detectable energy expenditure, no exotic technology signatures, no biological adaptations that would explain the observed capabilities. General ZYX approached him, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic displays like fractured mirrors. Any progress on tactical analysis? ZYX asked. Admiral Kethvar's scarred features expressed the kind of frustration that came from a lifetime of solving unsolvable problems. Nothing. Every scenario I run comes back with the same conclusion. Conventional military response would be futile. Our best weapons, our most advanced ships, our most sophisticated strategies, all useless against opponents who can simply choose not to be affected by them. Then, we hope their peaceful intentions are genuine. And if they are not, General ZYX's mandibles clicked in patterns indicating resignation. Then, we learn what it means to be an extinct species. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Council's monitoring station. Admiral Kethvar accepted the transmission, and Dr. Vorthak Prime's image appeared in holographic form. Admiral, we are detecting significant energy signatures from the void sector. The Devourers appear to be mobilizing their forces for the first time in over 300 years. Admiral Kethvar felt his blood freeze. The Devourers had been dormant since their last containment operation, sealed behind gravitational barriers that required the combined efforts of dozens species to maintain. If they were moving again, it could only mean they sensed new opportunities for expansion. Scale of mobilization? Unknown, but preliminary readings suggest fleet movements consistent with major offensive operations. They appear to be heading toward the galactic core. Admiral Kethvar's mind raced through the implications. The Devourers had always been attracted to large concentrations of life and civilization. Their movement toward the core sectors could only mean they were targeting the most heavily populated regions of the galaxy. Or they were investigating the new species that had just announced its presence through impossible demonstrations of power. Time of contact? He asked. If they maintain current trajectory and velocity, they will reach the outer colonies within 6 months. 6 months to prepare for an enemy that had previously required the entire galaxy's military might to contain. But now the galaxy was facing two unprecedented threats: the Devourers emerging from their dormancy, and a new species whose capabilities were completely unknown. The question was whether humanity would prove to be salvation or another nail in civilization's coffin. And with only 6 months to find out, there was no time for gradual diplomatic contact and careful cultural exchange. The galaxy was about to discover what humans were really capable of when they stopped being polite. The emergency transmission reached Earth at 1437 Greenwich Mean Time, crackling across the quantum communication array in Geneva with the urgency of a species facing extinction. Director Marcus Webb was reviewing routine colonial reports when a priority alert flashed across his screen, followed immediately by the most terrifying words in galactic diplomatic vocabulary: Devourer emergence. Request immediate assistance. Within minutes, the small cafe where he had been working was transformed into a crisis command center. Holographic displays materialized in the air above the ordinary wooden tables, showing real-time feeds from monitoring stations across the galaxy. The contrast between the mundane setting and the cosmic implications of the data being displayed would have been almost comical if the situation had been less dire. Sarah Chun materialized in the cafe 3 seconds after the initial alert, her form solidifying from quantum probability into physical reality with the casual ease of someone stepping through a doorway. She carried a cup of tea that was still steaming, suggesting she had been interrupted during a relaxation break somewhere on the other side of the planet. "Devourers?" she asked, settling into her chair as if she had never left. Marcus nodded grimly, gesturing toward the holographic displays showing the massive energy signatures emerging from the void sector. Full mobilization. First movement they've shown in over 3 centuries. The Galactic Council is requesting immediate emergency assistance. Sarah studied the data with professional interest, sipping her tea while analyzing threat vectors that would have sent entire civilizations into panic. Scale and composition? Unknown at this time. The Devourer's technology still isn't well understood, but energy signatures suggest at least 1,000 capital ships with full support fleets. They're moving directly toward the galactic core at speeds that shouldn't be possible with known propulsion systems. Timeline to contact? 6 months if they maintain current velocity. Less if they have capabilities the galactic community hasn't seen before. Sarah set down her teacup and activated her own communication systems, connecting to coordination networks that spanned not just Earth, but the growing human colonies scattered across nearby star systems. The conversations that followed were conducted in the rapid, efficient tones of professionals dealing with a challenging but manageable crisis. "Command, this is Chun. Requesting immediate deployment authorization for Devourer containment operations. Priority Alpha classification." The response came back within seconds, carrying the calm authority of someone who had dealt with similar situations before. "Authorization granted. Full resources available. Do you require additional personnel?" Sarah glanced at Marcus, who was still processing the casual way she was discussing the potential salvation of galactic civilization. "Unknown at this time. Threat assessment is ongoing, but initial analysis suggests standard protocols should be sufficient." "Understood." Standing by for mission parameters. The conversation was so routine, so businesslike, that it took Marcus several moments to fully grasp what he was hearing. Sarah was discussing the containment of an enemy that had previously required the combined military might of hundreds of species, as if she were planning a weekend hiking trip. "Sarah," he said carefully, "the Devourers aren't a normal threat. The last time they emerged, it took the entire galaxy working together to force them back into dormancy. They're not just militarily powerful. There's something that consumes the fundamental structure of reality itself." Sarah's expression became more focused, the casual friendliness fading into something that reminded Marcus why humans had survived 4 billion years of planetary attempts at species extinction. "Marcus, I appreciate the context, but you're thinking about this in galactic terms. The galaxy has experience with conventional threats. Military enemies that follow comprehensible physics, use technologies that can be understood and countered, operate according to strategic principles that make sense." She gestured toward the holographic displays showing the Devourer energy signatures. "These things aren't following galactic physics. They're following their own rules, just like everything on Earth. That makes them an Earth problem with an Earth solution." The implications of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had been thinking about the Devourers as the galaxy's ultimate threat, forgetting that humans had evolved on a world where ultimate threats were just Tuesday. "You've dealt with Devourers before?" Sarah's smile returned, but it carried undertones that suggested depths Marcus had never suspected. "Not Devourers specifically, but Earth has produced plenty of things that consume reality at the quantum level. Probably storms, dimensional cascades, probability inversions, temporal loops that try to eat their own causality. We call them weather." She pulled up additional displays showing Earth's current status, and Marcus was startled to see activity levels that suggested the entire planet was mobilizing for something. The thing about surviving on a death world is that you don't just develop individual capabilities. You develop the infrastructure to deal with existential threats on a regular basis. Every human settlement has protocols for reality breaks, quantum storms, and localized physics failures. Marcus stared at the data, realizing for the first time that humanity's casual attitude toward impossible things was not just psychological adaptation. It was based on extensive practical experience. How often does Earth face threats comparable to the Devourers? Depends on your definition of comparable, Sarah replied thoughtfully. Things that can consume entire civilizations? Maybe once or twice per century. Things that can remake the fundamental structure of space-time every few decades. Things that can propagate backwards through time to prevent their own defeat. Honestly, those are pretty common during storm season. The casual way she dismissed planet-ending catastrophes as seasonal weather patterns was somehow more unsettling than her demonstration in the arena had been. And humans deal with these threats routinely? We have to. They're part of our environment. You can't exactly evacuate an entire planet every time reality decides to have a bad day. Marcus was beginning to understand why Sarah had considered the arena demonstration to be routine. For a species that regularly faced down the fundamental forces of existence, galactic military power was probably about as impressive as a particularly stern letter. The communication system chimed with an incoming priority message from the Galactic Council. Admiral Kethvar appeared in holographic form, his scarred features showing strain that suggested he had not slept since the Devourer emergence. Director Webb, we are grateful for Earth's willingness to assist in this crisis. However, I must emphasize the severity of the threat we are facing. The Devourers are not a conventional enemy. Our best estimates suggest they are capable of consuming entire star systems and using the consumed mass energy to fuel further expansion. Sarah leaned forward to address the Admiral directly. Admiral Kethvar, I appreciate your concern, but I think there may be some misunderstanding about the nature of this threat. Could you provide more specific information about Devourer capabilities and operational patterns? Admiral Kethvar's expression showed surprise at being addressed so directly by what he still thought of as humanity's most capable individual. The Devourers appear to be a form of artificially evolved life that exists partially outside normal space-time. They consume matter at the quantum level, breaking down the fundamental structure of atomic bonds and converting the resulting energy into more Devourers. They are immune to conventional weapons because they exist in quantum states that make them effectively intangible. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. So they're quantum predators with exponential reproduction capabilities and phase-shifting defensive systems. Got it. The casual way she summarized an existential threat to galactic civilization made Admiral Kethvar's scarred features twitch with barely controlled frustration. Miss Chun, I do not think you understand the full implications of what I am describing. The Devourer's last emergence required the sacrifice of 17 entire species to create containment barriers strong enough to force them back into dormancy. And that was only a temporary solution. Sarah's expression became more serious, but not in the way Admiral Kethvar expected. Instead of fear or concern, she showed the focused attention of a professional assessing a technical problem. 17 species? That's a significant sacrifice. But it sounds like the galactic approach was to try to contain them rather than eliminate them. Was there a specific reason termination wasn't considered? Admiral Kethvar's response carried the weight of centuries of military analysis. Termination was deemed impossible. The Devourer's quantum nature makes them effectively immortal. They can reconstitute themselves from individual particles scattered across interstellar space. The best we could hope for was to force them into dormancy and maintain containment barriers. Interesting, Sarah mused, making notes on her personal communication device. That suggests they maintain coherent information patterns even when dispersed below the atomic level. Probably quantum entanglement networks maintaining consciousness distribution across multiple dimensional matrices. The technical accuracy of her analysis was unsettling to Admiral Kethvar, who had spent decades studying Devourer capabilities without achieving that level of understanding. You speak as if you were familiar with such entities. Sarah looked up from her notes with mild surprise. Well, they sound similar to the deep-sea probability worms that emerge from Earth's ocean trenches during gravitational storms. Same basic principle, quantum consciousness networks that can reform from dispersed particles. We had quite a bit of trouble with them until we figured out the proper disruption frequencies. The casual comparison of galaxy-threatening entities to local marine life was perhaps the most alien thing Admiral Kethvar had encountered in decades of interspecies contact. You are saying that Earth has naturally occurring organisms similar to the Devourers? Not exactly similar. The probability worms are much smaller, maybe continent-sized at maturity rather than star system-sized. And they're more focused on consuming temporal paradoxes than conventional matter. But the underlying quantum mechanics are probably comparable. Admiral Kethvar felt his understanding of the universe shift again. Not only were humans individually capable of manipulating fundamental forces, but their planet regularly produced threats that the galaxy would consider extinction-level events. And you have methods for dealing with these creatures? Sarah's smile returned, carrying the confidence of extensive experience. Of course, the trick is not to fight them on the quantum level where they're strongest. You have to approach them from orthogonal dimensions where their consciousness networks can't maintain coherence. Basically, you convince reality to forget they exist. The explanation was simultaneously enlightening and terrifying. Humans didn't just fight impossible enemies. They fought them by accessing levels of reality that most species couldn't even detect. Marcus was monitoring the conversation while simultaneously reviewing deployment data from Earth's rapid response systems. What he was seeing confirmed his growing suspicion that humanity's true capabilities were far beyond what even he had suspected. Sarah, I'm seeing mobilization patterns that suggest we're preparing for multidimensional operations. Are we talking about reality manipulation on an interstellar scale? Sarah nodded absently, still focused on her technical analysis of the devoured data. Probably. If these things are anything like our local variants, standard three-dimensional containment won't be sufficient. We'll need to establish orthogonal barriers across at least 7-dimensional matrices to prevent them from shifting into alternate quantum states. She looked up at Admiral Kethvar's holographic image. Admiral, I'm going to need detailed sensor readings from your monitoring stations, specifically quantum resonance patterns, dimensional stability measurements, and any data on reality distortion effects in areas where Devourers have been active. Admiral Kethvar's response was automatic, driven by military professionalism despite his growing bewilderment. I will have the data transmitted immediately. But, Miss Chun, if you are planning some form of intervention, you should understand that we are talking about an area of space covering multiple star systems. The scale of operations required would be beyond anything in our experience. Sarah was already pulling up star charts and calculating intervention vectors, her casual efficiency suggesting she dealt with interstellar scale problems on a regular basis. Scale shouldn't be an issue. Earth maintains rapid deployment capabilities for multi-system operations. We learned the hard way that local reality problems have a tendency to spread if they're not contained quickly. She gestured toward displays showing deployment timelines that suggested human forces could reach the threatened sectors within days rather than months. The main question is whether we want to attempt containment and redormancy like the galaxy tried before, or if we should go for full termination to eliminate the threat permanently. Admiral Kethvar's scarred features showed the strain of trying to process concepts that challenged everything he thought he knew about military operations. Full termination? Miss Chun, the Devourers have been contained for 3 centuries precisely because termination was considered impossible. Sarah's expression suggested she was genuinely puzzled by his response. Impossible? Admiral, they're just quantum predators with distributed consciousness networks. That's a well-understood threat category. Earth probably eliminates similar entities on a monthly basis. The casual way she dismissed the galaxy's ultimate nightmare as a routine pest control operation.